So now that the Mandalorian movie has officially come and gone, it's finally time to show you guys my fully finished Boba Fett jetpack. In this video, I'll walk you through how I brought this iconic piece of Star Wars history to life, the techniques I used along the way, and how you can make a prop just like this one. So without further ado, let's get right into the video. So jumping into Orca, you guys know how I get down in every single one of these videos. First things first, we're going to talk about how I printed it, then we're going to talk about how I sanded it, then we're going to go into how I painted it, then finally we're going to go into how I assembled it all together to make this jetpack come to life. But before we get into that, all of these files were brought from Galactic Armory. I highly recommend you guys go check them out. They have a bunch of Star Wars projects, Halo, Marvel, DC, anything you guys need to choose from. Galactic Armory is where it's at. They have a bunch of good files and it's very easy. They split them up as you guys can see on the screen for smaller printers, everything. Go to Galactic Armory. I highly recommend it, and they have a ton of great files, and it should be on the screen of the files that I use. Moving on, before we get into the actual printing, I'm going to talk about very briefly of the settings that I use to make this prop actually come to life as perfect as it can and the best quality that I can get out of these printers, because a lot of you guys been asking what settings do you use to optimize your printer the best way possible. So let's briefly get into that. If you guys want that as a video as well, let me know down in the comments, because I'll make a whole separate video on the settings that I use. If not, I'm just going to keep it brief. I started off with 0.2 layer height. I didn't feel the need to go down to 0.18 for the simple fact that this jetpack does not have a lot of details where I need to go down to 0.18. It was very much smooth all around. Like I said, it doesn't really have a lot of details, so 0.2 layer height was the one that I used. I put the seam line in the back. I always put the seam line in the back because it's easier to sand, and most of the time these models don't have any details in the back and you can't even see it if it was in the back. I always put the seam line in the back and it's way easier to sand. Moving on, everything else is just default. Besides the ironing, I used rectangular. Rectangular helped a lot for the ironing in Orca. I don't know, it just was very good to use. And after all of that, nothing else was touched. Everything was basic and the same. Orca is like an airplane cockpit when you first look at it, when you first get into it, but as you go into it and as you do it, it's very much like your creative direction and dealer's choice, and it gives you that leeway, and it's very easy to use it. It's not that bad. Moving on to the strength, I use 5 walls for this jetpack. Now you guys might be thinking, why are you using 5 walls on a big jetpack? I don't know why I use 5 walls. I wanted it to be very strong, but I didn't think about how big this jetpack actually was going to be when I printed it out. Having the armor on for Boba Fett and everything on with the big jetpack, yeah, I should not have used 5 walls, but I did. And then moving on from there, I used 10% infill on gyroid. I always use gyroid. Like I said in my other videos, cubic subdivision doesn't work for me for some reason. I don't know why. So gyroid has just been the main method of infill that I use, and I always go with 10%, which made the jetpack even heavier again. Like I said, everything else is just default. Moving on to the speed, I have 100 millimeters a second on my speed. You guys might be thinking you have a K1 Max and a V3 Plus, you can go way faster than that. I just choose not to because I was on cruise control. I didn't need to rush it. I didn't need to get it out faster, and I did want the quality to be as good as possible without going too fast. So I was like, whatever, just throw it at 100, and everything else was just default again. Moving on to the support, I use tree support auto. A lot of people do use tree support custom, where you can put tree supports wherever you need, but Orca does a very good job of throwing tree supports where I need it to be. So I just did it auto and a 30-degree angle. Didn't need to change anything there. Moving on from that, everything is just default again. I don't really touch any of those bottom settings. I don't touch anything with the multi-material. And then the other, I didn't use a brim, I didn't use a skirt, and I didn't use a raft as well. So none of that is the same, and everything else besides that is default. That is basically it for the settings. Sorry for going a little bit fast. I did explain it in all my other videos as well. I just want to get it out the way just so you guys get an idea on what I'm using and what I'm running to get the prints out and to get the prints to be the best quality, since a couple of people have been asking in the comments, and that's all I wanted to really do. So now moving on from the settings, we're going to start it off with the actual rear piece. This is where the jetpack actually attaches to, and this rear piece sits on my back so I can wear it as like a backpack. So this is the top piece. You could print this all together, but it's huge. It's a very big piece. I can show you guys right now. It's going to be this piece right here. This is a very huge piece. The first piece is going to be this top, and then you got the next piece is going to be this bottom part, and then there's 2 bottom parts right here. I had to solder this all together because it was way too big for my actual printer to even think about doing. So as you guys can see, Galactic Armory split it just as how I needed it to be so I could fit on both of my printers. But I remembered that my K1 Max was actually bricked and broken at the time, so I only had my V3 Plus for the entire jetpack project. This entire jetpack was made only on the V3 Plus. For the first piece, you know, I just split it right here. It wasn't gonna be, it was way too big to print it side by side, so I had to make it go diagonally so it can actually print on my print bed. That was basically it for it. I didn't need to adjust anything like the size or anything. I printed all of this at 100%, so I didn't didn't adjust any size. I had to put it diagonally because obviously it was way too big to go side by side, and it wasn't that tall, so I could print it out easily enough. And let's see how long this actually took. This took a day on the V3 Plus. Nothing really too crazy to really even talk about on this. I just had it going straight up. Always print standing up. You maximize the amount of quality of your print while retaining some of the strength. You won't have as much strength as if you were to put a 3D model laying flat. That will make you have the max amount of strength. But if you want a decent amount of strength, always up your walls as well, because the walls are very important, and print standing up so you can get that max amount of quality. Anyway, right here, it took a day, printed standing up, nothing too crazy here. Didn't even take a lot of supports. It just went back and forth all the way up to the top, and that was basically it. I don't think I have any b-roll of this right here. I have b-roll of everything else, so throughout this video it will be on the screen, but I don't think I had any b-roll of this big piece, and that was basically it for that. Now moving on to one of the main back pieces in the middle of the backpack that attaches on. It's gonna get a little confusing. This was the same way. I printed it standing up, nothing crazy here. It didn't have any supports on the front. Everything was in the back, and all the supports was in the back because it has a little knob, and the jetpack connects to this little knob which holds the jetpack onto the back piece. Nothing really too crazy. 6 hours, printed it standing up, and that was basically it for this. Now moving on to the right back piece on the bottom right, that's where this will sit. Nothing too crazy. Again, they're all basically the same thing. The only thing that was very hard about it was getting it to print all the different pieces, because I had to do a split. Like I said before, it was way too big to fit on my printer, and nothing too crazy. 8 hours, went straight up, threw it on the V3 Plus, and didn't even have to worry about it. Only thing is the support went in the back because there's an overhang right there, and there's a little overhang right here and right there. So other than that, very simple to print, and I didn't even have to worry about it. And it was the exact same thing for the left bottom piece of the back piece. Same exact thing. Support right here, support on the overhang, support in the back. Didn't have to worry about it. Threw it on the V3 right after. You might be asking, why didn't you just print it both at the same time? You could have got it done way faster. Like I said, my printer does not like printing two things at once. I have to go separately for some reason, so I just printed out separately, and it all came together perfectly, and that was all. So now that you guys have an understanding of what I'm talking about, I'm going to show you all the back piece so you can get an idea of where everything actually sits. So like I explained earlier, right here is that top piece which it cuts off right about here. Oh yeah, you guys can see the seam line a little bit on camera. Not really going to pick it up. This is one of the pieces, and then this is that middle piece I was talking about with the ball where the jetpack actually connects into. Then this is one of the sides, and this is the other side. You can opt into printing it all together. I just couldn't do that. There's some printers that could actually one-shot this, and props to you guys if you guys can, but I just really couldn't do that. So I just had everything separate and soldered it all together. As hints you can see in here, I'm gonna explain a little bit further of all the soldering and the soldering method that my brother taught me and how and what to use. But now you guys have a better idea of what this is and how the jetpack will sit onto this, and I'll explain it a little bit further as we jump into the next portion, which is the actual jetpack. So now jumping into the actual printing of the jetpack, this is how Galactic Armory splits all of the models up for you. Some of the models come together. If you have a bigger printer, you could print more at a time. Like I think these two right here come together and these two come together, and you can print those. But this is how I printed it right here. Everything split apart so my printers can actually get it done. So I firstly started it off with one of the bases of the jetpack, the bottom base. I think this is the bottom left. This was the way I printed it originally, which was very wrong. This is the way my brother showed me. He's like, why are you printing it this way? Print it this way, it's going to be way better to do. But I printed it this way right here. This took a day and an hour. Not too bad. I thought it was going to take way longer. This is how it was printed. It was printed the wrong way, but this is how I initially had it out, and I still used the piece. The piece was perfectly fine. It just took way longer than it should have, and it was more inconvenient to print it out this way. But this is the original way that I did it. Nothing too crazy here. I just kept doing the method of always printing standing up. It just went straight up on itself, straight up, and all the supports hit where it needed to be. There's an overhang here, overhang there, and a few at the bottom. And after that, that's the exact way how I printed this out, which was actually the wrong way. So moving on to the actual right way of printing it out, it does take an hour longer, but this is a way better way of printing it. All the supports hit this overhang at the bottom here, supports hit here, supports hit here, supports hit here, and this is connected into the actual thing, so you won't be able to see all of this, and you can easily sand this piece out and paint over it and do everything you need to do. So this is the correct way of printing it out. It's way more flat, way more grounded. The quality comes out better. Everything about this way of doing it is way better than the last way of doing it. The last way of doing it was just flat out wrong, and that was basically it. Printed standing up yet again, just went up on itself. Supports did everything it needed to do. The only thing crazy is these supports right here, but that's the only way you can get this done, is with having all those supports be there. And other than that, printed standing up, nothing too crazy there whatsoever. Moving on to the first initial top corner of the jetpack, printed it standing up, printed it flat. It had this little overhang at the bottom, so it needed a ton of supports down down there. It took a day and 7 hours. Most of these took days and days and days to print, and I only had one printer, so I was just throwing it at the wall and hoping it just gets it done, which I had a lot of time before WonderCon to actually get this jetpack done, so it wasn't really that bad. But I just had one printer going, and it was doing its thing, just throwing prints, and it held strong, and nothing too crazy here at all. Again, printed it standing up, hit the overhangs, it hit every detail it needed to hit. There's going to be a little bit of scarring right here, a little bit of scarring at the top, nothing that Bondo really can't fix, and a lot of sanding. The post-processing work of this was insane. There was a lot to do and a lot to sand, especially since I was soldered it all together. And that was basically it for this. Nothing too crazy yet again. So moving on to the other side of the top piece of the jetpack, same thing, printed it the exact same way. I'm not going to go too crazy into detail about this. It was the exact same way, it's just the opposite side. And I know I say nothing too crazy a lot because printing nowadays has gotten so good to the point where you can just throw it on the bed, throw it straight up, and all the software would just do it all for you. It genuinely wasn't that hard to print it out. The only thing that was very hard on this project was probably the sanding and the painting. That was the only difficult parts. Everything else wasn't really that hard. Moving on to the actual rocket of the jetpack, I had no other way of printing it out because it was way too big for my printer. Printing it standing all the way up was just way too tall. My printer couldn't do that. Laying flat couldn't do that either. So I had to improvise a little bit. And now this is the crazy part of the printing. I had to lean it back like this. I did not think this would work at all. I had no faith that this would work, and it worked perfectly. It worked almost way better than I thought it would. I have B-roll of this. It just went straight up through the back. I can't believe that this actually worked out in my favor. It took 15 hours, so not a long time at all either. And it just print laying flat on his back, and the support literally was just carrying him up. And then it also has, as you guys seen earlier, it has a little wooden dowel hole, so you can put a wooden dowel. I'll get to that towards the assembly part of the video, but nothing really crazy. Or actually, no, this was crazy. This was crazy to do. 15 hours, laid it flat on his back. It was very interesting. I didn't think it'll work originally, and it ended up working, and I'm very grateful that it actually worked. And my V3 was going through it, doing all these intricate projects and intricate ways of doing things. Moving on to one of the thrusters, again, printed standing up, had it facing the opposite way. Nothing crazy at all here, just had a support on this overhang and this overhang, and that was pretty much it. Only took 5 hours for this one. The other one was printed the exact same way. I'm about to show you guys. It was just pointed to the right. That's the only difference. That's it, straight up, had no details. Also, it did have a support in the middle, plucked it out instantly. The bottom is hollow, so there's nothing in it, just plucked it out. And this is just the right side thruster. Again, it was printed the exact same way. I did want to cover it a little bit. It was the exact same thing for the right side. So now this is the bottom thruster piece that sits on the bottom of the whole jetpack. It was printed standing up, a lot of supports because there's a ton of overhangs because it's each jetpack vent, so it's gonna have a ton of overhangs. I opted into printing standing up. I could print it flat, but I would have to sand so much of this, and printing it standing up and hoping it works was a way better option because it only scarred at the top here. If you guys can see this dark red, printing it just like how it is with all the supports and ripping the supports out was way easier, and it made it look way better, and I had a way easier time sanding it all down. Now finally, moving on to the details of the jetpack. This is one of the left details. Printed it standing up, nothing too crazy. It only took an hour. It's a very small detail. It slots right in. Everything that was split slots right into where it's supposed to go, so it's very easy and user friendly to do. Only took an hour. Again, just a normal piece going straight up, has its overhangs and has everything it needs. And last but not least, we have the final detail that sits on the right side of the jetpack. Again, printed it standing up, had its overhangs going. It only took 25 minutes. Very small piece, nothing too crazy here. Slots right into the jetpack, glued it together with Loctite, and that was it. So again, now that you guys have an idea and understanding of what I'm actually talking about, I'm going to show you guys the entire jetpack and each and every single piece that made it all come together. So here's the man of the hour. Starting it off, we have the bottom piece. This entire piece down here is one of the bottom pieces without the thruster, of course. This bottom piece right here is one of the thruster pieces. Then moving on to the other side, this piece right here is another piece. Then going here, this is another piece right here, and this is the two top pieces together. Going down, we have the rocket right there. Moving on from there, we have the two detailed pieces that I lastly explained. Then we're going to have the two thruster pieces right here, and all of that together is going to make this entire jetpack. Like I said, again, for the back piece connects to these two holes and this bottom hole right here, and the back piece sits there, and I shove the jetpack in, scoot it right in, it sits all together, and then I can actually wear the jetpack on my back. This thing is huge and is heavy. This is probably one of the biggest props I made and put together because, oh my god, dust. This thing is actually huge. Now moving on to my most hated part, we got sanding. First things first, I used to start off with 80 and then go all the way up from 80, 120, 150, 240 and so on. But now recently, like I've been saying in all my videos, I'm starting off with 60 grit sandpaper. There's not really much of a difference. It's kind of dealer's choice. It's basically the same thing. I just like to start off with 60 now and keep going. So starting it off, we have 60 grit sandpaper right here. Boom. Sand as much as you possibly can with the 60, especially sand now, because you will have a lot of soldering lines and a lot of solderers and a lot of like welds and everything. So it's going to look a lot messier than what you usually would have if you had a print just all printed in once. But for me, this was all soldered together and I had a lot of soldering marks and soldering lines and a lot of welds and a lot of holes that I had to really sand. So get in there with that 60 and rough it up, scrape it, scratch it, do it, everything. You just want to mess it up as much as you can, because you have a lot of these initial layer lines that are up, especially if you have a bigger prop such as this. It's going to have a lot of rising layer lines. You want to knock those all down, those initial layer lines, and get it all out the way. And I can't stress it enough, since you soldered, you're going to have a lot of high rise layer lines that you really need to get down and soldered and smooth, because you don't want to see the solder lines and the connecting marks. You want to get those out the way as much as possible. And moving on from that, we have 80 grit sandpaper here. Boom. With the 80 grit, you're doing the exact same thing. Sand as much as you possibly can. Knock down those initial layer lines, knock down the soldering marks as much as you can. The Bondo would also fill it in a little bit, but you want to knock it down as much as you possibly can. Just get it out the way. I can't stress it enough. If you're hand sanding, it's going to be a little bit tougher if you were to get a machine and palm sand it, just because the machine can knock it down a lot more, especially since you have those soldering lines, than the hand sanding. My hand sanding is also a good method as well. Keep going, sand as much as possibly can. When you think you're done sanding, you're not done sanding. Keep going, sand. Moving on from there, get to the 120 grit sandpaper here. Boom. Sand again. Sand as much as you possibly can again. What that 120 is basically doing is getting anything you're missing, getting anything that you missed out and didn't really initially sand. It's not going to knock those soldering lines. So like I said, if you see those soldering lines still there, go back and knock it down some more with the 80 and the 60. But the 120 is kind of sanding for the love of the game, getting stuff that you missed, getting stuff that you didn't initially get on the first two passes of sanding. And then you're going to move on from there to 150 grit right here. Boom. What that 150 grit is doing is basically the same thing as the 120, getting anything you missed, getting anything you didn't initially get on the first passes and the first coats. It should look something like this right here. That's what your print should look like towards the very end of the initial sanding of the initial dry sanding phase. It should look something like that. Get in there, sand as much as possibly can. If you feel as though that you half-assed it or didn't get a lot done, go back, because you still have the opportunity to go back, use those 60s, use those 80s, use those 120s, and actually get in there and sand everything down as much as you can. Now it's time for my GOAT, the legend 240 grit sandpaper here. Boom. Now with this 240, you're going to keep going, keep sanding. This is kind of going to clean up everything that you did in the earlier coats. It's going to get things that you missed. It's going to knock down those layer lines. It's going to knock down everything you can possibly get. It's going to knock down that soldering line a little bit more as well. It's not going to do as much because it's a higher grit, but it's going to knock it down as much as it can as well. Again, get in there, sand as much as you can, and knock everything down that you can, and you can get your print to look smooth initially, but you still have a long way to go. Moving on from that, you want to get yourself some Bondo glazing and spot putty. Boom. You want to get yourself Bondo glazing and spot putty. What this is going to do, it's going to fill in those imperfections, it's going to fill in those lines. It's going to get the stuff that you really can't get while dry sanding. You want to apply that on. It dries very quick. I usually like to get some gloves and use my finger and just spread it on. You can get a piece of foam just like this and then spread it on as well. This dude named Odd Viking right here, he has a method of where you use, I think it's 2 times Bondo to 1 times acetone, or the opposite. Mix that together and make a little concoction, and you can use a paintbrush and spread it on. I did that method for all my echo stuff. You can do that as well, but I just like to use my finger, put it on some gloves, and rub it on. It's gonna fill in all those imperfections, especially those soldering lines that you're gonna have when making this prop. You want to get that, spread it onto those soldering lines so you can sand it right back down and you can just fill right over it. That's exactly what you want to do. In every other one of my videos, I talk about putting Bondo on. You can put it on, do your thing. For this, you're going to need to put Bondo on, especially on this, because you have the soldering and the welds and all of those scar marks all all over, so you're going to want to put a lot of Bondo. You're going to need a lot of Bondo for this prop. I put Bondo all over this jetpack, and it's a big prop. So you're going to need a lot of bottles of this stuff. You can get it at Lowe's, you can get it at Home Depot, you can get it on Amazon, any home appliance store like that. They don't run too expensive. I think it's about $7 to $8 for a bottle of this, so it's not too bad and not too expensive, but you're going to need a lot, especially for a bigger prop and a bigger project that you're working on. You're going to want to Bondo it all down to get it as smooth as possible. Trust me, you're going to need a lot of this stuff because it runs out quick. Again, it dries very fast. About 1 to 2 hours it'll be dry enough to sand. I usually like to wait a day to let it cure, but you don't really have to do that if you don't want to. And if you're in a hurry, you can just sand it down in about an hour or two and it'll be fine. Moving on from there, again, my GOAT 240 grit sandpaper. Boom, right there. You want to get the 240 back out and sand it all back down. I highly recommend you wear a mask because this stuff gets everywhere. It's going to fling around everywhere. It's going to get all over your clothes. So wear an apron as well. Wear some clothes that you probably do like homework or like construction work on. Like you don't really care about the clothes. Wear some clothes like that because it's going to get all over your clothes. It's going to get all over your hands. It's going to get all over your everywhere. Wear a mask. It gets in your lungs. You don't want to breathe this stuff in. You don't want to do a cancer speed run. You do not want to do that. Wear a mask. Stay safe. Wear some gloves. I usually don't wear gloves. You don't really have to wear gloves when working with Bondo, but I feel like I should say wear gloves too to keep y'all extra safe. So wear some gloves as well. Knock it down with the 240. Sand, sand, sand. You're gonna need a lot of 240s because what this Bondo is gonna do, it's gonna gunk up inside the sandpaper and it's gonna make the sandpaper unusable. So you're gonna need a lot of 240s. Make sure you stockpile up. There's a lot of places on Amazon that sell 240s only. I highly recommend you buy that as well, so you just have 240s and you can go crazy on the Bondo. Sand it as much as you can. Do not have fast sanding it. Sand it all down. I made that mistake with my Boba Fett helmet, which I didn't sand it down fully when it was on the Bondo stage, so it has a lot of lumps. You want to sand it as much as you can. Sand it all down. Get the Bondo almost erased because the Bondo, what it is doing, it's seeping in those holes, so it isn't even possible to sand it because it's going to seep down in those layer line holes and cover it up. So when you prime it and paint it, you won't be able to see it anymore. So make sure sand it as much as you can. And if you feel as though you half-assed anything up to these points, go back. There's no harm, no foul in going back to a lower grit, to anything else like that. You need to get it down. So if you feel as though you half-assed on the dry sanding stage, go back, hit it with those 80, 60, 120, 150, whatever. If you feel as though you half-assed the Bondo stage, go back, reapply more Bondo, let it dry, go back out, sand it again. It's a lot of work, but it's going to pay off in the end when your prop is looking smooth as a baby's behind. So make sure you get in there, sand everything down, and get everything you need to be complete. Now moving on from that, you want to wash your print. Now I usually like to wash my print after the dry sanding stage before I Bondo. A lot of people don't like to do that. Like my brother doesn't like to do that either because you're gonna put Bondo on it and sand it back down anyway. It's gonna have a lot of dust and everything flying around anyway. But what you need to do after the Bondo step is definitely wash your print. You're gonna have a lot of plastic just laying around on the print that you sanded down. You're gonna have a lot of Bondo dust laying on the print. You're gonna have a bunch of just debris and dust and a bunch of stuff just laying on the print. You want to wash your print after that Bondo stage because when you throw the primer on, it's going to be very hard to re-sand the primer back down with all that dust and crust on it. So make sure to wash your print right after you're done sanding that Bondo down to have the best possible outcome. But moving on from that, you want to get yourself Rust-Oleum filler primer. Boom. I like the basic Rust-Oleum filler primer. I know a lot of people like Duplicolors filler primer, and I know a lot of people like wood fillers and different other types of primers they like to use. I just like the basic Rust-Oleum filler primer. It's done the job countless amount of times and years of works and projects. It's done the job every time, so I use that one. I used to use the 2-in-1 filler and sandable. That one doesn't fill as much, and also you can sand down the basic Rust-Oleum filler primer just as good as the 2-in-1, so there's really no point in getting the 2-in-1. The regular filler primer just does the job perfectly, does everything I need to do, makes everything easy to sand down. So I highly recommend get you a primer that you like because that's the next stage. You're going to be priming now. With this primer, I like to go on with 3 coats. I had to use a lot of primer just for how big this prop actually is. I had to use a ton of primer. I think I blew through 2 to 3 cans of just primer alone, priming both of these two right here. They're not that expensive, $7 to $8 for the Rust-Oleum can. I don't know how much the Duplicolors and the wood fillers go for. For the Rust-Oleum can, $7 to $8, not too expensive. Prime everything down, make sure you spray it with 3 good coats. Now, if you do have overcoats or like drippings or anything like that, don't worry, because you can sand down the primer and it will be sanded down in the wet sanding stage. So you don't need to worry about if you have any running or you messed up on a priming piece or you don't really like how the primer came out and you want to redo it. You will have the opportunity to redo it once you sand it down. I like to do 3 heavy coats. Make sure it's a big prop. You have to cover a lot of areas, so cover everything. Make sure to look around the prop. If you see like bits of the plastic showing, spray that down. If you need to go 4 to 5 coats, you can do that as well. It cakes on pretty well and it dries very, very quick, about 10 to 15 minutes. Boom, it's dried and seeping into those layer lines and covering everything. Make sure, don't half-ass it. If you do, you can go back, but you won't be able to go back. Once you put this primer on, you're done. You won't be able to go back to that Bondo stage. You won't be able to go back to that dry sanding stage. So make sure, like I said, I can't stress it enough, in every one of my videos, do not half-ass it, because you won't be able to go back after you throw the primer on. Now, once you're done priming all that down and you have everything how you want it to be and you're really satisfied with the outcome you have so far, you're not done yet. I know it's a lot of work, but you're moving on to the wet sanding stage. What you want to do first, grab yourself a 400 grit sandpaper. Boom. You want to grab yourself 400 grit sandpaper. You want to go into an area that has a lot of water. I like to use the bathtub, especially for a project that's this big. I use the bathtub. I'm no shame in that. I ran the water, had it going up, and then sanded it in there. My brother likes to use the sink. You can use a spray bottle, throw water on it. Anywhere you can get a lot of water to sand it down, get a lot of water to sand it down. You're gonna sand, water, sand, water, sand, water, sand. Keep going with the water, sand, back and forth until you have something like this going with your sandpaper. Until you have like a little bit of gunk. The water is going to keep it from clogging up too much, but there's going to be a point where we're going to have to replace the 400. But you can go for a while just water, sand. Like I said, if you have running, especially go over to the running side, sand that back down. It's going to bleed a little bit. You're going to be able to see a little bit of plastic. You're going to be able to see a little bit of Bondo showing through. That's fine. It's going to be covered once you hit it with the paint, so don't even worry about the Bondo and the plastic showing through. It's a good sign. Don't sand too much to the point where you're shredding all of the primer off, because you're still going to want to have the primer on. Just have it smoothed down and keep going. Water, sand, sand as much as you possibly can. It took me a little while to sand this all down because it's so big and it's already put together by the time I'm doing this, obviously. So it took me a little while to sand everything a little bit down, but make sure when you're sanding, keep going, don't half-ass it. Now, this stage, you can either choose to reprime. You can do that. If you want to make sure to wait till everything dries, grab a microfiber towel, pat dry it, let it air dry, whatever. Once it's dry, go back outside and hit it with primer again. Or if you're satisfied with the product that you already have, you can move right on to the painting step. That's exactly what I did. Once I felt the need that it was dry, everything was good, I didn't need to do anything else, I said, okay, it's time to actually paint this all together. One last little tip of sanding: if you feel as though you need to go up higher on your project and your prop, like 600, 800, 1000 to 2000 grit sandpaper, if you want that really clean and glossy finish, you could do that as well. I chose to opt in to stop at 400 because I'm not going for that glossy finish. I just want it smooth enough that you don't see any layer lines and it looks good enough so I can paint it over it and do everything I need to do. I just wanted to add that little tip in there. If you want to go up, you can always go up. Like this Power Ranger helmet that my brother made, he went up to 2000 and he started buffing it like a car to buff it out and get it very, very smooth. That option is always available to you. I just wanted to let you guys know that that's there. So now moving on from the sanding portion, we're on to the painting portion of the video. Starting things off, I had this satin earthy green. This is the same paint I use on my Boba Fett helmet. Boom, right here. I had to get a lot of this stuff because it is a big project, so I had to get 2 to 3 cans, I believe, and spray all on there with multiple coats. Now this sprays on very good. Rust-Oleum has good cans. They all spray on very, very good. There's no problem with the nozzle. Everything was good. So I sprayed that on there with the multiple different coats. Got it all to be green. Made sure everything was on there dry and really, really good painted. It was on there. I had to make sure everything was good with the paint. Let it dry, let it run its course, paint it some more, and do everything I needed to do. And once that was dried and cured, I moved on to the hand paints. We have the metallic here for the little details. Boom, we have this metallic. I've been running this metallic for the longest time on a bunch of my props. It is a great metallic hand paint. I recommend it. I recommend graphite powder over that, but if you had to choose a hand paint that you need for a metallic, I highly recommend that one. Moving on, I got these 2 Craft Smart reds and yellows for the little detail pieces right here. Boom, this right there. You can get these at any home appliance store. I like to go to Michael's. They're very, very cheap. I think they're around $4 to $5. Some of them are cheaper. Some of them are maxing out at like $7. So it's very, very cheap for those paints. And I just painted everything I needed to paint on there. As you guys can see here, you see the red in the middle right there. I had to get that going. I had the metallic for these, the yellow for these, metallic for this right there, and then a little bit of yellow in there. And then as for the little thrusters, I had metallic and red, so it can actually give it that kind of iconic look. What I would change with this, I would honestly make it more weathered. It was very, very smooth, and his stuff is way more weathered, so I would put a base coat of a metallic or some type of metallic base coat like I did with my helmet and just rip off the green. But I didn't have enough time. I literally was con crunching with the paint, so I had to hurry it up, so I didn't have enough time to do that. But if I were to ever remake this jetpack, I would make it way more battle damage. As for the back piece, it was just all flat green. You didn't need to worry about that. I can show you guys the sanding job as well though. You see that? That's what I mean. Do not half-ass it, bro. You get that very good smooth finish. Do not half-ass it whenever you do for the sanding phase. That was basically it for the painting, and not too much. There's a little bit more details you can do. Boba Fett stuff is kind of like, so you could just do, you could freestyle with that. You don't really need to follow as much. Obviously, you need to follow the main base colors. You could put a spin on it. You could weather it. You can not weather it. You could do whatever you want with this. So that was all the paints that I used. I just put a little bit of details in there. It was mainly the green paint for everything, and that's basically it for the painting. And now last but not least, we have the assembly of it all. Starting it off, I highly recommend you guys get a soldering iron. No matter where you get the soldering iron, Amazon sells a lot of cheap ones. You can go into a lot of home appliance stores. I think like a Hobby Lobby might got it, Home Depot might got it, Lowe's. Get you a soldering iron. I'm telling you, for cosplay and 3D printing, it's going to change the game of what you do. If you have any models, there's going to be models a lot of the times where you can't print it in one shot. You're going to have to print it in multiple different pieces. Now you can glue it and call it a day. Plastic welding is just so OP. It's so clutch. My brother thankfully left before he went to Texas. He left behind his fabled soldering iron right here, this relic. This is probably my vital instrument from Gotcha Yakuta right here. Boom. He left behind his soldering iron. So all I did, I used the soldering iron and I soldered everything together, and then I Loctited the stuff I needed to Loctite in place, and I used E6000. Now I don't have the E6000 because it actually exploded on me and I had to throw it away. Get yourself some E6000, or I think it's E600, one of the two. Get yourself that epoxy. You put that epoxy on first and then you solder over that. Get yourself some filament. As you guys can see, I have a ton of filament back there. Get yourself some filament, some spare filament that you're not really using or you have extra. Melt it down, solder it on. That's exactly what I did. What my brother did teach me was put holes inside, because the soldering iron is very hot. It's obviously going to burn through the plastic. So you don't want to solder too much. If you're going to solder an inside piece that no one's going to see, burn holes through it and then solder over it with the filament that's already there, and then double solder on top of that so it can get even stronger. That's exactly what I did. It's not going to break apart. It's together forever. I did that for all of these right here. For this piece, this was one of the side pieces as I explained earlier with the printing portion, and this is like the top piece. Burn holes in the middle. I'm gonna show you guys a little bit closer. Right there, you see these holes. Burn holes through and just solder through it. And then on this side right here, you can kind of see the soldering line. I try my best to get it off right here, but this is a piece nobody's seeing, so it doesn't really matter that much. But I threw some filament on there and soldered right over all of that, and then I just Loctited it together to make sure it was very, very secure. But yeah, burn holes through the middle and solder over. Burn hole, solder over. Burn holes, solder over. I think I have a little bit of B-roll footage. If I do, it's gonna be right here. But next time, I'm gonna show you guys like actual footage of me burning holes and soldering over for a different project. But that's exactly what I did for that one. For the jetpack, it's a lot better. Like this, the soldering holes are a little bit more inconspicuous. As you guys can see it like right there, like right here through here. It was very, very hard to get those spots and sand those spots down. Like I said, don't half-ass it. Try your best to get it. It's gonna be very, very hard to do. But there you go. It's soldered on this side. And then for this side right here, again, burn holes, solder over. Burn holes, solder over. This one right here, I soldered through. Didn't need to solder this midsection right here. That doesn't matter. And then the bottom part, again, burn holes, solder over. And then again, use spare filament that you have to solder all together as one. And like I say in every single one of my videos, get yourself Loctite super glue right here. Boom, right there. Now Loctite, what do I say in every single one of my videos thus far. I love y'all. Let me get a sponsorship. You guys got my email? Hit me up for a sponsorship. Loctite, I love y'all. I'll never stop using y'all Loctite. Anyways, get yourself some Loctite super glue. Throw it on there. It burns into whatever you're putting together, and it will melt the plastic together and form an eternal bond. It will burn to whatever you're making, 3D prints, foam, cardboard, whatever you're using. It'll burn that material with the other thing you're trying to glue it on, and it'll mend it together forever. So I highly recommend get yourself some Loctite. I can't stress it enough. And that was basically it for all the assembly. I did this before I did the paint, but I wanted to talk about it after just to keep the line of the order of the video. Usually when you're soldering something, you're gonna solder it before you actually paint it, so it can have all like the mess ups and the grayness, and you can sand it down and do everything you need to do. And once it's actually all together, then you'll paint it afterwards. But the timeline kind of off, but I just threw it into the video right here because it's just another portion of the video of assembly. What you can do is throw sanding this way to the third spot and put assembly this way to the second spot and go like that, but make sure do not half-ass anything. And that is basically going to be all for the entire jetpack, and I'm going to show you guys how I wear it and how I put it on right now. So now I got it on, and it sits just like this, y'all. Do a little twirl, spin. This is exactly how it sits. So it's just like a backpack. I completely forgot in the assembly section to talk about these straps. All my brother did for these straps, he's the one that actually put this together with the straps. He got some, I think we had some extra backpack clips laying around. So we put these backpack clips on, we folded it just like a backpack and glued it in with the Loctite again, like I kept saying. And then we had these little clip things to make sure it glues on together, and he just attached it onto the top right here. If you guys can see, boom and boom. And then he attached it onto the bottom as well. And then all we did was put the straps on. I had some gray straps as well from Amazon. Threw these on and sits right on the back. Now you see the back piece and you see the jetpack. With everything on is heavy. Right now it's not that heavy because I have nothing on of the cosplay. With the entire cosplay on, bro, this shit is so heavy. It's way too heavy. I should not have made it with 5 walls, but right now it's manageable, and that's basically it. I'm gonna hit the outro with this on. Actually, let me stop trolling. Hey, so I'm gonna hit the outro with this on. So with all that being said, let me crouch down for y'all. You have the jetpack on right there. All that being said, that's gonna do it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and watched to the end. Thank you guys so much for continuously supporting me, like always. Like I said, without you guys, I wouldn't have the motivation to keep grinding. I wouldn't have the motivation to keep going and keep dropping and uploading these videos. So thank you guys so much for staying around and staying tuned. Final thoughts of this project right here. Would I make it again? Yeah, I would make it again as an upgrade to my Boba Fett cosplay. I'll throw it up here and here. It would just be an upgrade. I wouldn't really do too much different. I would just weather it a lot more, but all the tips and tricks that I learned and put in this video, I would use and do the same exact thing. I would print it the same way, I would sand it the same way, everything's the same. I would just weather it a little bit more. That's my only gripe. I had a lot of fun with this project. I soldered this entire thing on my own. I put it all together. The only thing that my brother helped me do was actually assemble the straps and everything. Everything else I did was all me. So I had a lot of fun with this project. I will definitely be doing something similar like this. It probably won't be like a jetpack like this, but it'll be something similar. Yeah, that's basically all. With that being said, again, thank you guys for so much for watching this video and staying tuned and always tuning into my channel. We're seeing a lot of growth and success recently, and I'm loving that. I'm gonna keep going. I'm not gonna stop. You guys will always get this video. The next video that comes out is gonna be the Boba Fett armor video or a price video, and I also am making something for AX. I'm remastering my Jabber lamp, so stay tuned for that as well. That's gonna be a video again. So all that being said, let me get out of you guys' hair. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me in the comment section, on my Instagram, anything, on TikTok. If you guys have any questions, just let me know. I will be more than happy to and more than willing to answer all your questions and to give you guys all the information you need so you guys can get out there and have fun and make props just like this one and have a good time. So always reach out, let me know. Let me stop this outro for being too long. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, your night, whenever y'all motherfuckers is watching this video. And as always, DMB on top. Keep designing, making, building. I'm gonna see you guys in the next video. Peace.